Welcome Mike Hartnett, our safety professional consultant, to present with us today. Thanks for being here today, Mike.
Thanks, John. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you about incident reporting and how we can really utilize it to make us more competitive in our fields, right? Give us a competitive advantage. Okay, let's start off with the safety helpline. FCA has a safety helpline that any of you can call if you have a question related to safety, need some advice of where to start with, or where some resources are, what resources are available through the FCA for safety. Reach out to the FCA Safety Helpline, either at the finishingcontractors.org email address or at that 844-414-SAFE phone. Either way, the message will come to me and my team. We'll find the person with the best ability to answer that question and get back to you as soon as possible. All right, so when we're looking at incident reporting, we really need to have a good definition for incidents. Right, and we'll start with an incident with loss is an undesired event that results in harm to people, damage to property, or loss of a process. Right? But we also have to consider incidents without loss. When we're talking about reporting, incidents without loss are also important. These are commonly called near misses, but these are undesired events which, if something had changed just a little bit, right, circumstances were a little bit different, it happened a little bit before or after, it could have resulted in harm to person, damage to property, or loss of process, right? So this could have been an incident with loss, except for some factors. So what's the difference between that incident with loss and the near miss? Generally, we're talking about time and distance, right? There's not all that much difference between a near miss and a loss. So if one or both of those time and distance had changed, we would have had an injury or property damage. So basically, these come across as free lessons that we can learn from. So here's a quick video to show a near miss. Just a little bit, right? Less than a foot, less than a second made all the difference in the world on that. This as well is a similar situation. And we have near misses like that at our job sites all the time. Somebody almost slipping on something, right? Somebody almost getting hit by a lull. These things we need to learn from and make sure that we have those reporting put in. That way we can learn from it as an organization. So how many people on this call think that worker injuries are inevitable? Anybody think they're not inevitable? I know I've worked on job sites that have put in over 1 million hours building substations and transmission lines. So this is not what we would call safe work, right? Work that has risk as part of it, and yet still able to do so without those injuries. Right? In order to really get there, we need to ask, are they acceptable? Is it acceptable to have injuries? No injuries should be acceptable to us, right? We want to make sure that no matter how serious that injury is or how many there are, that they're not acceptable. We need to find ways to make sure we don't have repeat injuries. So even if that's just a first aid is something we really need to get to the bottom of, because what is a first aid in one instance may very well have been close to an amputation, right? Another second, if somebody would have noticed a little bit later what was happening, instead of having quick reflexes, we could have lost a finger instead of having a cut on that finger, right? So that level of injury still needs to be looked at. Sometimes it's us that's injured, right? How would we feel about that? How do our employees feel about it when they're injured? we want to make sure that we take these things into consideration and that we're reporting all of those and the near misses so that we can avoid these incidents. And near misses and that reporting of near misses are one of the keys to getting rid of incidents and injuries. So when we look at how much a worker is worth, right, there's different ways that we can look at this value of a worker. Right, chemical value, we're worth about $160. Right, not a very good return. The international standard says we're worth about 50,000, for life insurance. Employer value over a lifetime is about 2.5 million, right? Standard. And if we were to sell you off to different black market medical facilities, you'd be worth about 45 million. I don't know the logistics of how that works, but the person you're most valuable to is your family, right? Your workers are priceless to their family, and they should be priceless to you as well. So strategies for how to get this incident reporting to happen. First of all, we need to have a process. Right? You have a process for reporting incidents because OSHA requires you to have that process. And we have that process clearly defined in FCA's Safety and Health Manual that's available for download for you as a resource. Next, has it been explained to every employee? This again is a day one requirement from OSHA. We need to make sure that every worker is explained to them that this is the person I report to, this is what I report, and there is no retaliation for reporting. Right? So I'm pretty sure all of us are doing this, but still we find that we aren't getting all that reporting, all that much reporting often, right? If we are not getting any reports of first aid injuries, and yet we're having recordables, we're having lost time injuries, it's just not realistic, right? That means that we're not being reported on those near misses. We're not reporting on those first aid events. If it only comes to your attention, if it is too big to be hidden, then that's not good reporting. And that's not indicative of a learning organization, right? That's not one that is getting better. And that's really going to hurt your ability to be competitive. So the question is, do your employees believe there will be no retaliation? This is a serious question in the trades. I know was a serious question here in the trades in Chicago. Why would employees be hesitant to report? It's been a while since I've been in the field and I know things have changed. But a phrase I heard a lot was, if you fall off that ladder, you're fired before you hit the ground. Okay. In my 15 years of working in Chicago, in the trades, I never met anyone who reported an injury that was recordable or lost time that continued to work for the employer. Not one. Right? So we've changed over time. We've gotten better as employers on that stuff. And I'm sure it's not happening to the same level as it had, but it takes a long time to get over losing a job for reporting an injury and determining whether or not you should report this one. Right? So what steps have you taken to make sure your employees know there will be no retaliation? And you have to make sure that you take those steps. And almost more important here is, are your field superintendents and foremen aligned with your company policy? Because if not, you're going to get retaliation in the field, regardless of whether the office has a no retaliation policy. We need to make sure that all of our management, right, everybody from the owner of the organization down to the foreman leading, have the same attitude towards incident reporting. Incident reporting makes you money. incident reporting makes you money. I'll support that argument a little bit later in this training, but that's a truth that you have to understand and you have to get buy-in of if you're going to get good reporting. So near miss reporting is something that we can really push on and work on to get rid of some of that stigma of reporting, because there is a stigma around reporting. So what are some of the ways that we can make it work? Near miss reporting forms are something that I've seen in the past. And in my experience, they don't work very well. Right. First of all, they're inconvenient. I gotta stop what I'm doing to go get paper and fill it out. It's unlikely to happen. And even if it is filled out, does it end up getting to where it needs to go? It's also one-way communication. We go ahead and we write a near miss report and we turn that in and we never hear anything about it. There's no reinforcement to ever report. You don't get feedback on that report. Right? Nothing good could come out of reporting is the attitude. Right? So when we have forms, what happens with them is invisible to employees in the field. It's better for us to go with a more modern approach using electronic reporting. Now, there are a bunch of apps out there, some of them very good for reporting, right? Near miss or inspection tracking. And depending on how much you want to spend, you can get a very robust app-based reporting app. But it's not necessary that we spend that money on it either, right? If we want some of those other uses, then maybe it's worthwhile. Not here to say that no apps are worth spending it. There are a few that really can help give you a competitive edge. But we could always create a text group within our employees, right? Within our foreman at the very least, perhaps in our crews or of everybody. What I have done in the past is used WhatsApp, which is a common app that's free. You can create a group that's a secure group where we can only allow people in with invitation and nobody from outside that group has access to it. And when we do that, when we start having people report and show pictures of what they're seeing, this now becomes visible to the field employees, right? So now maybe there is a benefit to reporting. We start seeing pictures of other sites where there's a hazard, right? Let's say the general contractor or the Sparky on site, it just puts cardboard and top of a circuit breaker panel that's live and puts hot, right? And we have to paint all around it. That's a near miss, right? We could take a picture of that, post it up. Now we're setting what the expectation is in the field for how to deal with this hazard. We can have people show problems that they're having, issues that they're having, so that we can respond to it. And when we correct it, we can send a picture of it corrected to the group. Right? So this really normalizes that reporting. It starts some conversation across different sites as far as what is acceptable. Because a lot of times we're all seeing the same thing. And if nothing can be done about it, or nothing has been done about it in the past, we believe that we have to accept it. We can reset that line, right? If we have good near miss reporting and if we have good incident reporting. Now we can help build that near miss reporting, right? We can incentivize it without spending a lot of money. Right. One of the ways that I found was very useful to get buy-in on a near miss reporting starting out from nothing was to offer rewards, right? $10 gift card to Starbucks is an adequate reward. It's not much, but it is motivating. Each month, you take the most impactful near miss and you send them a gift card and make sure you announce it to everybody. Each month, you take a random near miss report and we give them a gift card as well, right? We start incentivizing that near miss reporting and you'll start getting more reports. Now, when near misses start turning into something where it's not really a near miss, but I want to point out that Bob's a bad foreman, then we can go on and correct that, right? As long as we are paying attention to that reporting app, then we can pull those and have discussions with the people that put them on and really set that expectation for what we're looking for, right? And I know that one of the things that I really pushed while trying to push near miss reporting is that, pointing out something that's wrong without offering a solution, that's just bitching, right? That's just complaining about it. Provide an option of what you think would be a good solution to the issue, right? If we tell people that not only do they have to provide a near miss, but what they think would be a good response to it, we can start that conversation. So when we look at our injuries that we have and our near misses, we see our consequences on top, right? And all of these are very, very visible, right? Fatality, lost work day, OSHA recordable. Those are all things that we see, right? The first aid case, the near miss and property damage. Hopefully we are seeing those things. But down below are the foundation for those, right? And if we look at this with a concept called the iceberg model, right? An iceberg, as you may well know, has a lot of an iceberg. A lot more of the iceberg is underneath the water than above. All we see is what's on top, right? All we see are the consequences. But really, the activities that lead to that, the unsafe practices, the unsafe procedures, the unsafe conditions, those take more analysis to find, right? And in order to find those, we need to look for them. And we need an indicator that something's wrong and where to look. That's what near miss and incident reporting gives us, right? It gives us the information on what activities and what root causes, underlying causes, are making these incidents happen. That way we can make sure we don't repeat them, right? So we have to look for the things below that water line. But it helps a lot to see the things that are up above that water. So when we are building protections, right? When we have our employees out in the field, we use lots and lots of different measures to protect our employee, right? We design our basic design of how we're going to do things. We have our safety systems in place. Our individual, tradesman knowledge is another defense. The training we provide is a defense. Safety leadership for our foremen and our superintendents, that is a defense. The decision-making process, peer-to-peer observations, all of these things that we put in place each help to stop that incident. But there's deficiencies in each layer that we put in, right? We aren't perfect at any of these things. And that's why they call it the Swiss cheese model. Each defense looks like a piece of Swiss cheese. And there are no incidents until a whole lines up. All those deficiencies line up, right? That's when we get those incidents. But all we really need to do is plug one of these holes, right? If we change our training, we get a little bit of change there and we stop that decision, we stop that issue from being a hazard, right? Then it doesn't happen. And that's what we want to do with our incidents. We want to find what can we have done differently to stop this from happening, right? Put in the correct protective measures so you never have that same list of issues, those same deficiencies adding up to an incident. When we have those injuries, they're going to impact across many different levels, right? Not only is it going to hurt the person that's there, but the coworkers and team are going to be impacted, right? And depending on the severity of the incident, the severity of the outcome, this can truly impact coworkers and team. I've seen people that were part of a fatality. They were not the ones who died, but those that were on the same team with them that they watched die. And that can be very devastating to a person, right? They may not ever recover from that. Your cost schedule and quality is going to be impacted by incidents and injuries, right? And the customer and community can be, depending on the severity of the incident. When we're looking at our fatalities in 2020, there were over 4,000 fatalities, right? And that's a reduction from where it was before, and it continues to move down. Injury and illness cases continue to reduce, but in 2021, we had 2.6 million incident or injury and illness cases to workers in the US. So these are still pretty impactful. And they create direct costs, right? Direct costs, there's lots of them. These are ones that are straight line costs to that incident, right? Your medical expenses, any money you have to put out administratively for that, workers' comp, legal services that we bring in, damaged equipment, reduction in production, lost time for those specific employees and the cost to treat them, right? All of those are your direct costs, and these add up. And on average, an injury will cost $40,000. Right? So there's a lot of recoup on that that we are better to avoid, right, than to pay the costs. But on top of direct costs, you also have your indirect costs, right? These are the issues that come about because of it, right? Reduced manpower, having to train replacement for those who are injured and can't come back to work, your incident investigation and the time that you put into that. You find the right corrective actions to do, well, it's going to cost time and money to implement those. Productivity is lost, damaged equipment, lowered employee morale. That can really be an issue, right? We have an injury and we don't do anything to correct what happened, then it really does give the impression that the employees are just a number, right? We'll just get somebody else from the hall. That is not the impression we want from our employees, right? We want to keep that morale higher. Because when that morale's down, that absenteeism goes up. Legal costs, ongoing treatment for the injury beyond the initial, insurance premiums. Insurance premiums are real big indirect costs, right? You have your direct costs of what your insurance costs on that day, but going on after that, when it changes your EMR, that's really going to impact it. God forbid we have an incident bad enough that the media takes notice of it, and now we have a picture of one of your vehicles with the logo on the side on the 5 o'clock news. And that's OSHA comes into it as well. Right? The direct costs or indirect costs are generally 4 times as much as the direct costs, right? So with the direct costs of $40,000, what we're really looking at is a total cost of about $200,000 per injury. Now we talk about OSHA, and of course we have those penalties as well, right? These are issues that we really want to make sure that we avoid. We cannot afford to pay OSHA repeatedly. And civil and criminal penalties may apply in certain circumstances, right? If we know about hazards and ignore them, then we really can put ourselves in a bad place. So where are we going to get a competitive advantage Well, we start by learning from our mistakes, right? If we're constantly trying to get better as an organization, not just in the office, but with communication in the field as well, then we can really learn from our mistakes. And when we start learning from our mistakes from injuries, we can really impact our workers' compensation costs, right? So, experience modification rate is what insurance companies utilize to decide how much they're going to charge you. EMR, experience modification rate, is based by injury or by industry NAICS code. So the average for every industry is always 1.0. Right. And it works as a multiplier for your premium. So if you have an industry average insurance of 1 million, right, for the number of people that you'll be employing, and you have a 0.8 EMR, then you're going to pay 800,000. But if you have a 1.8, then you're going to pay 1.8 million. Right? So this can be very impactful on top of the fact that, there's a lot of general contractors out there that will not let you bid on jobs if you're above a 1.0. Right? So we need to make sure that we keep that EMR low. And the way we do that is from learning about our incidents and making sure we don't repeat them. And some of those incidents are near misses. And when we start learning from those near misses and our front line starts to understand that we want to know what's messed up in the field so we can fix it. When we get that shift, we really get a difference in what we get. So looking at your EMR, you need to know some things like it takes 3 years of data on your EMR. So this year's insurance costs take into account 23, 22, and 21. So if you had a serious injury in 21, it's still impacting your rates in 24. Right? The higher the number of claims, the higher the payout, the higher that EMR is going to go, the more it's going to be impacted. You want to make sure you double check with your insurer to ensure your rating is not higher than it should be. It's a complicated formula, but it is an objective formula. I'm not going to go into the formula here. It is a really complex formula, but you can have your insurance agent walk you through it and make sure you have an understanding of how they got to that number. This also proves additional benefit for you to see where and what incidents really impacted that number most. And one of the a simple thing just to take from here is that one of the things that really impacts that number is the ratio of lost time days versus restricted time days. If you can get your people that have lost time back into the shop working or into the field working, the number of days you cut them out of being on workers' comp drastically impacts the cost of your workers' comp. Right. It's pretty basic, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We can have somebody come in, pay them their hourly rate to do nothing, and still make more money than if we let them sit at home. Right. That's not considering all the lawyer commercials that are on daytime TV. So, and there's lots of useful things we can do with people that are on lost time as well. Right. So if we have people that have to cannot perform their work, make sure we give them something else to do. So other ways we can keep the costs down are fewer claims, right? That return to work program is pretty much what I was just talking about, and making sure that management is committed to safety. Build that safety culture, continuous improvement. That's what near miss reporting is. That's what incident reporting is, right? You pair that with incident investigation and you really get a continuous improvement mindset where we are not making the same mistakes, where we are learning from our mistakes, become a learning organization. And you'll find that follow through, that accountability really pays dividends. So we want to make sure we're going above and beyond, right? Minimum wage, minimum safety, that's not going to get us the grade we want. We want to make sure we use good practices, make those improvements, look for innovations that you can utilize to get better, right? That's part of the reason why I imagine you're on in the FCA membership here, taking part in this safety meeting, right? Communication is hugely important, and the incident reporting is really tied into it. We want to make sure that our workers are aware of the hazards, right? That they employ safe work practices, that they know we don't want them taking the risks. We want them pointing out the hazard so that we can do something about it. Having a safety huddle at the beginning of the day with the foreman really is good, right? It really sets the tone, sets the vision for the day. And having that weekly toolbox talk, this is something else that FCA provides for its membership. Having that weekly toolbox talk, you start it out at the beginning of the week, you go over what that is. You have different people in the field reading it instead of just a foreman reading it, right? Or as I've experienced, the foreman passing it around and saying, look, we don't got time to read it. Just sign it and get it back to me, right? That's not what we want. We want them having that discussion, having that safety huddle, and then following up throughout the week, reinforcing the trainings that were on that toolbox talk. We also want to make sure we look at our contract requirements. Many of the hazards you're going to get in your near miss reporting are not going to be hazards created by your employees. Right? Oftentimes, they're going to be things that are under the control of the general contractor. Guy on the front line doesn't have all that much impact with the general contractor. The foreman sometimes does and sometimes doesn't. We need to make sure that when the foreman isn't fulfilling, or when the general contractor isn't fulfilling their responsibilities, that we are reaching out to that contractor, that GC, and getting those safety hazards cleared up. Right. And most of the time, in my experience dealing with my clients out in the field, when you do bring these safety issues to the attention of the general contractor, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times they weren't aware of them. And they're appreciative of having those pointed out so that they can get them corrected. Because they know as well as you do that those exposures, those safety hazards that are out there are a liability to them. Right. And somebody is much more likely to get hurt if they're not correcting those issues. That's where we get the grade. So don't take any near miss as ignorable. We need to try to learn from all of our near misses. It's just a postponed injury in my mind, right? A near miss today is a future injury that just hasn't happened unless we find where those gaps are, find where those exposures are, and plug them. The safer your crew is, the safer you are. And we want to make sure everybody has that same let's all go home at the end of the day attitude. That's how we all make it to retirement, right? I'm looking forward to those chairs at some point in time. And I know all of your employees are as well. Let's do what we can to get them there, right? Get them across that finish line. And finish up, as always, with the FCA Safety Helpline. Don't forget to reach out if you have a question.